We've been working with kids for over probably 8 years now. We started out by doing butterfly gardens in schools, but we realized pretty quickly that they weren't sustainable because the parent who was all gung-ho her kid would graduate, or the teacher that was really interested in this, he or she would get another job in another school, or just at the end of the summer, the principal would see, nobody's been out there weeding it, and she'll insist that they just take it all out because it looks like such a mess. So we shifted to creating butterfly circles, which involve these wild native host plants, and they're essentially little small biodiverse sanctuaries for all manner of insect life and bird life, and humans to be able to see it and to be mesmerized by the amount of biodiversity you can have in a very small space. And the nice thing about these is they're weeds already. So, a circle is great because you can mow around it, but if you don't have to weed it, really. I mean, sometimes we do pull out invasive plants, but typically you just don't have to weed it because these are already considered to be lawn weeds. And they are vastly more biodiverse than any butterfly garden I've ever seen. It was inspired by an experimental pollinator site in Coral Gables, which was a vacant lot that had a lot of these wild native host plants. And a neighbor who happens to be the head of the Miami Blue chapter of the North American Butterfly Association lived in the neighborhood, and he would take walks, and he started noting all the different butterfly species he saw in this vacant lot. So he got them to agree to stop mowing a certain part of it. And when I saw that, I was just blown away. But I knew that in Miami Shores, the Village Beautiful, we couldn't have something that looked that messy. So we, again, used art to create, used parts of Kim Heisey's beautiful portraits to create a beautiful butterfly circle sign, so people would know it's intentional. They would understand what it is. And early on, we tried not to use the word pollinator because people were still at that point thinking, bees, I don't want bees around, but luckily people have evolved, I think, and are really beginning to understand that we need bees. But when I think back about those early times in doing, say, we had these seeds to share workshops where we taught kids how to germinate native plants from seeds. And we typically would use some plant like a tropical sage, which performs lots of ecosystem services. It gives nectar for butterflies and bees. Seed-eating birds like the beautiful painted buntings eat the seeds. Hummingbirds drink the nectar as well. So it performs a lot of ecosystem services, and if they can put that in their garden, that's transforming their garden. And there was one kid in particular who he had the most beautiful photograph of him proudly holding up this Seeds to Share kit with all the sprouted tropical sage seedlings. And we've used that in so many, promotional things because it was such a compelling image. And the lovely thing is I ran into him and his mother and I reconnected. They came over, he showed me some butterflies that had just eclosed in an enclosure. I gave him giant swallowtail caterpillars and wild lime leaves for him to take home and watch them develop and pupate. And that connection, that long-term connection is so wonderful and important to see that he's still, to this day, interested in butterflies, interested in propagating plants. And so that we just really, really feel it's important that these kids understand the importance of this nature that surrounds them. And I did a wild plant scavenger hunt at the Miami Shores Elementary School about a year ago, late spring. And then that was a Tuesday night. We found all sorts of the wild plants in a courtyard in the elementary school, which is a beautiful 1930s building, I think. And then that following Saturday was Green Day, which is the big street fair in Miami Shores. And a friend that I hadn't seen since before the pandemic came to the booth where Bound by Beauty was, and we started talking, and he was saying that the only thing that he and his kids were doing that weekend was attending the Green Day Fair and doing the Nature Bio Blitz, which is where you take photos of nature and you upload it to iNaturalist. And I said, well, why don't you meet me tomorrow morning at Constitution Park? Because it's really full of biodiversity, so the kids would have a lot of opportunities to take photos. And I hadn't seen the kids since before the pandemic either. So anyway, I get to the park, they arrive in their car, these two little kids get out, and the little girl, who turns out is in 3rd grade, came over towards me and then started pointing at the ground saying, oh, there's Virginia pepperweed, there's Spanish needle, there's Biden's, she started naming all these plants and my jaw dropped and I said, how do you know all this? And she said, well, I was at your scavenger hunt. If you sit kids down in front of a butterfly garden and you point out the names, they're not going to remember those names. But if you give them an ID card and some lawn flags and you send them out into what looks like a grassy area, and then all of a sudden they've got all these lawn flags marking all these butterfly houseplants. And it's all of a sudden you go from being a grassy area into being a butterfly meadow. You know, as long as you don't, use the toxic chemicals and as long as you don't mow it out of, existence. So that was a very a wonderful thing to have that. And we're going to do another, something similar, I hope, over Earth Day this year. Because getting out into, another thing we did was last year, for Earth Month, we went to a local school and we took some native milkweed, which were covered in aphids, because aphids love milkweed. And because they were covered in aphids, nature sends in plant pest predators. And we don't think about that very often. We don't think really of, ladybugs as plant pest predators. We think they're cute little insects, people have refrigerator magnets made out of. But what most people don't know, I didn't know until I was living here, so in the last 6-7 years, my gardener didn't know, who's a country boy from Georgia, that ladybugs have larvae. And these larvae look like little crocodiles. And not only do they look like little crocodiles, they are little cannibals. They're cannibalistic crocodiles that they're ravenous for protein. So they'll eat anything in their path, from aphids to ladybug eggs, to ladybug larvae, to ladybug pupa, which is why, when you order ladybugs and, to get rid of an aphid problem, they have, and then the ladybugs just fly away and don't leave eggs, because I think they know their offspring are ravenous and they don't want to lay their eggs in a situation where there's not going to be sufficient food to feed them, because otherwise they're going to eat each other. And, kids love this stuff. As a result of that, we came up with a presentation called Mummies and Cannibals in the Garden, the Life Cycles of Some Plant Pest Predators. And the cannibals, of course, are these ladybug larvae. But the mummies are also really cool if you're a kid. They're little tiny parasitic wasps that lay their eggs inside the soft bodies of the aphids. And then when the larvae hatch, they eat their way out from the inside, leaving behind these little brown, sort of mummified looking husks. And kids can't get enough of this, but they also hopefully will go home and say, no, don't spray those off. Look, they're ladybug eggs, and look, that's a ladybug larva. Don't spray the aphids off either with water or any sort of insecticide, because let nature do what nature does best.